Good evening and welcome to our special broadcast at 8 p.m. I'm Aisha Sindhu. On the show tonight, we're looking at a key meeting that President Donald Trump is scheduled to hold with his national security team this week. This powwow is reportedly an attempt to shape a new United States policy on South Asia, more specifically on Afghanistan. But the United States Defense Secretary James Mattis has said that a review of the Afghanistan strategy is a difficult task because of Pakistan, a concern that has obvious outcomes for the rest of the region, specifically India. So what will be the future of US-Pakistan ties? We'll get to unpacking that loaded question in just a bit, but first, here's a report on that meeting that's coming up.
President Donald Trump has put his leading national security advisors to work, ordering a complete rethink of US strategy on South Asia. His Secretary of Defense James Mattis concedes that Pakistan is complicating matters. A big part of President Trump's policy review deals with how United States will be dealing with Pakistan moving forward. If indications are to be believed, the US could adopt a firmer approach. The United States is considering cutting financial aid to Pakistan. An option to boost security relationships with India is also on the table. The policy review could not have come at a more appropriate time. A Republican congressman, while writing for the Washington Times, called Pakistan an ugliest ally and said that it has American blood on its hands. As the House of Representatives imposed tougher restrictions on defense funding, Senator John McCain called out Pakistan for its support to the Haqqani network.
Our conversations with our friends in Pakistan were frank and candid. And we told them that, in our view, that the Haqqani having a safe zone in their country was not acceptable.
The US is considering sending more troops to end the war in Afghanistan, but Kabul has time and again hit out at Pakistan for supporting terror groups on its soil, saying it's a hindrance to the peace process in the country. Bureau Report, WION.
Joining me on the broadcast to talk more about that meeting that is expected to change things around is Ambassador Vivek Kachu, a former Indian diplomat. Also with me is Glenn Carl, former intelligence officer, joining in from the United States. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks very much for being here. If I can come to you first, Glenn, what exactly, for the benefit of our understanding, what will Pakistan have to do to certify that it is not providing military, financial or logistical support to US-designated terrorists?
Well, I wish you hadn't used the word exactly, because I think that I'll be doomed, everyone will be doomed to get it wrong if we have to ask for precision in what the Pakistanis should do, what they will do, and what even the Americans expect. That said, I think here shaping up is a rare instance under the Trump presidency of where there is coming to be a coherent or more coherent approach, at least a consistent one, if not coherent. And that is because the Republicans control the Congress. They have taken a harder line traditionally towards, and a simpler one, towards terrorism. And this is in line with Trump's own views. We saw what happened in Saudi Arabia when Trump took a simple, rather simplistic approach to who were the terrorists and who were not and what should be done about it, which would lead me to think, given General Mattis's influence in foreign policy, the conservatives' ascendancy in the Congress, and Trump's inclinations, that the Pakistanis would have to take stronger measures still in Waziristan and somehow convince Americans and Indians too that the intelligence service in Pakistan was not offering support to the Haqqani network or other terrorist groups. How you can prove that if you're Pakistani, I think, is a tall order. But I expect that we'll see more straightforward messages possibly this way from the United States.
All right, Ambassador Kachu, can I ask you, that is the lack of, let's say, precision and what exactly the United States expects from Pakistan, something that our neighboring country has used to its benefit for years on end now?
I think the United States wants Pakistan to desist from fomenting trouble through the Afghan Taliban and the Haqqani network. There is, of course, a connection between the two in Afghanistan. However, the United States over the last 15 years has not been able to find a way to make Pakistan do this. And President Trump's administration is now trying to address a problem which has existed for these 15 years. I think President Trump wants to take tougher measures. The defense establishment in Washington also appears to be wanting to do the same. But I think also that there are holdouts, perhaps in the State Department, who want a more, what they feel would be a holistic view to handle Pakistan, which is to also, while taking a tougher approach, also try to assuage Pakistan's concerns in Afghanistan, and that those concerns stem quite clearly from India. Pakistan says it has an India-centric approach. So I think what India has to watch out is that in this process, India is not brought into the equation while President Trump formulates his policy. Because you'll recall that in the early years when President Obama was formulating his policy, there was such an attempt, and India had to tell the Americans very clearly that we are not involved in this at all. And that is why instead of Pak-Af India, it just became Pak-Af. So that is something that we need to watch out for.
Right.
Though the signals are that they will not do this, because, one last sentence, because the Trump-Modi joint statement was quite remarkably forthright in calling on Pakistan to stop cross-border terrorism and to control groups, terrorist groups on its territory.
Absolutely, and that hasn't been the only statement that's come out of the United States that seems to suggest that there might be a change of policy on hand. We'll get to some of that in a bit, but before we do, the United States, let's remind our viewers, once termed Pakistan as a key ally, but now President Donald Trump wants to deal with Pakistan with what's being reported as a firm hand. A possible reason for that could be a Department of Defense report on Afghanistan, which pins the blame for Afghanistan's stalemate quite clearly on Pakistan. The report says that militant groups, including the Taliban and the Haqqani network, continue to utilize sanctuaries inside Pakistan. The Afghanistan-Pakistan border has been named as a sanctuary for various terrorist groups. The report also says that the militant groups retain freedom of action inside Pakistan, with support of elements from the Pakistani government. So quite damning overall, Glenn, in terms of that DOD report that we were talking about. But if the current strategy is not helping the United States win in Afghanistan, that's something that General Mattis has said quite clearly himself, then what exactly do you think is going to be achieved by sending more troops to Afghanistan?
Well, I think that's a separate issue, or not quite the same issue as what to do about Pakistan. And more troops, the assessment is, could stabilize the situation, probably return matters for the government in Kabul to the circumstances that obtained 18 months ago, I suppose, when the country controlled Kabul government controlled 67% of the territory, and now it's down to 53 or so. So there's not an expectation that it would lead to victory, as in the defeat of the Taliban or the Pakistan-supported elements there, but that it would perpetuate the viability of the Kabul government. I think that's the moderate success, which is significant, that some additional troops, 4,000 I think, are likely or are anticipated to achieve. Beyond that, we get once again to Pakistan and the safe haven and the support that they provide to the Taliban and others. But this is a problem that Trump hasn't discovered, or maybe Trump has discovered it, but America hasn't discovered. It's one where if we push in one direction against Pakistan, things can get worse in another. One example, and then I'll stop. 30 years ago, I guess it was now, Zia-ul-Haq took a line that the United States found dangerous and we increased pressure on him. The result was that the Pakistanis stopped even allowing their non-commissioned officers and officers to train with Americans. And they took other measures. Forget about the nuclear sharing, which is a huge issue, of course, which we found, the United States found, against our interests. So if we were to take a line cutting off funding and pressuring Pakistan on terrorism now, as we have attempted to do and talked about doing for years,
right,
there could well be the countermeasure. And this is the dilemma that no American administration has been able to solve.
Absolutely. You circled back to Pakistan, so I'll continue with that line of questioning. Ambassador Katu, we're hearing of the term stick approach when it comes to Pakistan, this time by the United States, as opposed to the carrot approach. What exactly do you think the stick approach is going to involve, and how far is it going to be different from the carrot one?
Look, what will be the nature of the stick approach? The Pakistanis know how to handle the American stick approach, and they've done so consistently over the past decades. If the Americans, for instance, resort to drone strikes, the Pakistanis will not be happy about it, but they can live with it. The only thing that will matter is if the Americans are willing to put boots on the ground to clear up the sanctuaries. Now, that will be a very major signal of intent, not only intent, it will be a practical manifestation that America's patience is over. But I do not see President Trump taking that decision. So I'm clear in my mind that the Pakistanis will play the Americans out on this, and the 4,000 troops, or even if there are few more troops, will really not make any difference apart from providing a holding operation. And the real issue is, how does America end Pakistan's sanctuaries? And those sanctuaries will not end through sanctions or through talk or through pressures on of an economic nature, because Pakistan has friends, China for instance, who will sustain it. So that is the real issue. What can the Americans do to be effective? All this anger expressed in DOD reports is all fine, but what will be the practical measures? That is the question.
Okay, so big question mark on practical measures, not so much on theory, which we've heard quite a bit of already, but just speaking, as the ambassador was mentioning right now, of the possibilities for mulling what else can be done with Pakistan, that perhaps lends to why exactly this policy review by the United States seems significant at this point, because a new policy for Afghanistan will define the way forward for the United States in the region in many ways. Experts are seeing this move as an attempt to consider fresh ideas and mull options to tackle the ISIS threat in Afghanistan. And this review also gives an opportunity to the US to clarify its stance on Pakistan. Glenn, can I ask you, what is the US's stance when it comes to Pakistan? What exactly is Pakistan to the United States? We keep hearing of, a status as a major non-NATO ally, other monikers, if you will. But what exactly does Pakistan stand for when it comes to the United States?
Well, I'd prefer to frame it in the way of, what does America seek to achieve with respect to Pakistan? What national interests does the United States have? All the talk about allies, friends, and all this sort of stuff it sounds nice, but countries have interests fundamentally. Our interests are that Pakistan remain overall a stable government and not descend into chaos, so that extremists could increase their power or the support that the population feels for them, that Pakistan not share its nuclear technology and try to, the United States wants Pakistan to adhere to non-proliferation and not expand its forces, that it stop creating trouble in Jammu and Kashmir, and that it stop creating trouble in Afghanistan. Long-term, the largest strategic objective that Trump doesn't seem to understand, and that this latest series of statements would indicate he's working actually to harm, although not intentionally, what is the nature of Pakistani society with respect to radicalization, and is it moving towards a more pluralist, tolerant society, or one where radicals have ever more influence and support? And this is the huge issue. How we achieve these objectives, no one has really worked out. But beyond that, Pakistan is not of particular interest to us, except as a destabilizer or a stabilizer for the region and for Islam.
Okay, just to put what you said into buckets, let's talk about the failure to fight terror effectively. That is one of the requirements that the United States has, or rather expectations that the United States has from Pakistan, that it effectively fights terror. Do you believe that in the years since 9/11, the United States hasn't received enough intelligence to indicate that Pakistan is not fighting terror effectively? You just designated Sayyid Salahuddin as a global terrorist, and he is linked to the Hizbul Mujahideen. What more, really speaking, needs to be done by Pakistan to change the way the US looks at it?
Well, it's a mixed record that Pakistan has, and this is the frustration. On the one hand, they will accept our aid and do some things that the United States wants them to do with respect to Al-Qaeda, say, or other global terrorists, or people of concern, individuals and groups of concern to the United States in Afghanistan. And on the other, they'll take the aid and they'll use it to support the same people that they are detaining or attacking at our request. And that goes back to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, when the Pakistanis understandably insisted that they would control any material and financing that came through Pakistan from the United States. And they gave it to factions that we didn't like, as well as factions that were fighting the Soviets. And that's something we could not control, but the decision was, well, it's better to fight the Soviets as we are able to than to do nothing. And that's continued to be the case with regard to counterterrorism. So they have suffered 6,000 or more casualties in Waziristan going after groups that we want them to go after. Because they want to go after those groups, because those groups are threatening the stability of Pakistan itself. At the same time, ISI, although Pakistan denies it, has had associations with the Haqqani network and LET and Al-Qaeda even. And it's a never-ending conflicted balance that we try to achieve. It's
right.
Very frustrating.
Ambassador Kachu, the numbers that we're talking about, everyone, all the casualties and victims of terror have quite significantly been outside of the US mainland since 9/11. Do you think that the United States, I'll ask you the same question, do you think the US has looked away when it comes to receiving proper intelligence on Pakistan's fight against terror, and has it been a very strategic move on the part of the US?
Look, let's discuss this in 2 points. One, the US priority during the 80s was to fight the Soviet Union, and they looked the other way as Pakistan went nuclear. That's a matter of record. After that, in the 90s, their interest waned in Afghanistan, and as they allowed Pakistan to do what it wanted there through the Afghan Taliban. Point 3, after 9/11, they coerced Pakistan to helping them in fighting the Taliban in the immediate aftermath, and they succeeded in ousting the Taliban from Afghanistan. But once the Taliban went into Pakistan, the Americans looked the other way, because the Pakistans gave them about 600 low-level Al-Qaeda operatives. Yes, there were a few people like Khalid Sheikh, etc., who also were handed over to the Americans, but the Pakistanis got $33 billion for it. Now, thereafter, the Pakistani argument has always been that if too much pressure is put on them, Pakistan will go under, Pakistan will become more extreme. I mean, this is a kind of blackmail. And the Americans have always succumbed to this, taking what is called a holistic view. And in this quest, or because of this reason, the Americans in Afghanistan, on account of Pakistan's actions, have lost 2,500 soldiers But if this is how American strategy operates in the quest of its national interests and its strategic interests,
right,
then, well, no one can say anything. These are decisions which the Americans have to make, and they made these. But this is the factual situation, backed by evidence.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm running out of time on the segment, but I don't want to leave without first showing our viewers in many ways that we don't really have to look too far to understand Pakistan's confounding approach when it comes to clamping down on terrorists. These visuals coming up on your screen are of Sayyid Salahuddin, a man that the Department of State on the 26th of June this year, that's less than a month back, identified as a specially designated global terrorist. It identifies him as, quote, the senior leader of the militant group Hizbul Mujahideen. It's September 2016. Salahuddin vowed to block any peaceful resolution to the Kashmir conflict, threatened to train more Kashmiri suicide bombers, and vowed to turn the Kashmir Valley into a graveyard for Indian forces. Under Salahuddin's tenure as a senior HM leader, the Hizbul has claimed responsibility for several attacks, including the April 2014 explosives attack in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which injured 17 people, end quote. We've only got time for some last closing comments. 17 injuries is what the Department of State has mentioned while terming Sayyid Salahuddin a global designated terrorist. Ambassador Kaju, do you feel that given everything we've spoken about in the last 20 odd minutes, that India has any hope at all for a change in strategy or policy toward Pakistan at this meeting that's being dubbed as a change in the South Asia strategy?
I think there will be stronger measures. We've got to watch out for India getting dragged in, even indirectly, and we'll have to be very firm on that score. But at the end of the day, I do not think the Americans will achieve anything much. As I said, the litmus test I apply is American willingness to put their boys in the tribal areas in Pakistan to close down the sanctuaries. Now, that's not going to be an easy decision, and no American president, I expect, will take it. But unless that is done, the Pakistanis will continue with the sanctuaries and will continue to play the Americans.
Glenn, are there any new ideas for the United States when it comes to dealing with Pakistan and what India is constantly harping about, which is its base as a sanctuary for terror outfits?
But that one's easy to answer. No, there are no new ideas. There are ideas and issues that the Trump administration is discovering because it hasn't dealt with these things and doesn't know very much. Although I take the Defense Department knows what it's doing, although not necessarily with the most broad perspective. I agree with I think everything the ambassador has said, with one exception, and that is that even were America to act more decisively, America has less power to decide and influence events than most people imagine. Even an invasion would not solve the problem.
All right. I don't know how to react to that last comment, Glenn. The United States is considered the most powerful democracy in the world, but we leave it at that. Thanks very much, gentlemen, Ambassador Kaju and Glenn Carl, both for being here on the conversation with us. Appreciate you taking out the time to talk with us here at WION. On that note, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Bharatiya Janata Party and who it's named for its vice presidential pick, and of course talk a little bit more about the presidential elections that took place today. More on the other side of the break. Stay with us.